Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley blasts Premier Jason Kenney, saying new COVID-19 measures announced yesterday don't go far enough. We hear from local business owners who discuss how the latest COVID-19 restrictions will impact them. And we hear from Franco Terrazzano from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, who says Alberta has a spending problem and it needs to be brought under control right now.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The Alberta government announced 1,265 new COVID-19 cases today. With around 15,600 tests completed yesterday, the provincial positivity rate is around 8%. There are currently 13,719 active cases. Dr. Dina Hinshaw says there are 355 people in hospital, with 71 being in the ICU. Hinshaw says the province is also up to 500 COVID-19 related deaths. Hinshaw says with the province's new restrictions put in place, it should help flatten the curve. Hinshaw also says Alberta Health Services is taking steps to ensure that more beds are available to those who need them.
In the coming weeks, they plan to make available more than 2,000 acute care beds and up to 400 ICU beds to be allocated for patients with COVID-19 across the province if they are needed. In some cases, these will be new beds. In other cases, these beds are existing hospital spaces that will be made available as patients are moved into continuing care beds in the community.
NDP leader Rachel Notley calls the new provincial restrictions half measures. She says they were likely the result of political bargaining instead of advice from public health officials.
What we needed to see was strong action to stop the spread of COVID-19 in its tracks. Instead, once more, we saw half measures. Overall, with a couple of exceptions, there were very few new restrictions announced. And where action was taken, I didn't hear any new support for the small businesses or medium-sized businesses that will be negatively impacted.
Notley added that Alberta remains the only province in the country that does not currently have a mandatory mask mandate, and one is desperately needed. The City of Calgary has declared a state of emergency as COVID-19 cases continue to rise in the Stampede City. This gives the city powers to take action quickly, including the head of the Calgary Emergency Management Agency, to make orders that are implemented right away, which include shutting down recreation centres and certain businesses. Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi says declaring a state of local emergency will help the city restock pandemic supplies more effectively and potentially access funding help from other levels of government. The Calgary zone has over 4,900 active cases of the novel coronavirus. Provincially, however, the Edmonton zone leads the way with over 6,100. Here in the South Zone, which includes Lethbridge, there are currently 649 active COVID-19 cases. As you've heard on Bridge City News, the province is bringing in a wide array of new public health measures as coronavirus cases continue to rise. For schools, the new measures mean junior and senior high school students will move to at-home learning beginning on November 30th.
Grades 7 to 12, starting this coming Monday, November 30th, are no longer in school. And so learning will occur at home. For some of our schools, it will take Monday, November 30th to do some transition time, to make sure that they've got their families connected on technology, that they have, if there's reassignments of teachers to different things, because the scheduling looks a little bit different, then those parents will know from school communication if their classes will be starting on Monday, November 30th, or Tuesday, December 1st, right? Because for some of our schools, it does mean some logistics and reassignment and just making sure all of our students have navigated the technology piece.
Once they return from their holiday break, students will continue to be required to learn at home until January the 8th. Businesses in Lethbridge have to switch to 25% capacity after the province announced sweeping new measures that will start on November 27th. Trevor Lewington with Economic Development Lethbridge says that it's important to strike a balance between keeping the vulnerable in our city safe and keeping our businesses open.
Clearly, this is a public health emergency like we've never seen before. We have to protect vulnerable people. We have to take concrete action. And I think the government's done that with some of the restrictions they've implemented. At the same time, I think those restrictions need to be targeted. You can't have a blanket lockdown across the economy. The impact of that in the spring was pretty devastating, both from unemployment and all of the complications on mental health and everything else. So this is about, striking a fine balance. Again, I think it's really important that we recognize job creators and employers. They have to be able to continue their operations, but take all the steps they need to do.
The 25% capacity for businesses will be in effect until December the 15th. A note from Nikkei Yuko regarding how the new government restrictions are impacting the Japanese garden in Lethbridge. The horse and wagon rides have been cancelled December 4th and 5th, as has the Shakespeare Meets Dickens performance on December the 8th. As for the Winter Light Festival, officials are working with the province as to the best way to move forward. According to a Facebook post, more details about the Winter Light Festival will be coming later this week. With the province's new restrictions, recently announced banquet halls, conference centres, trade shows, and concert venues have been ordered to completely shut down. In Lethbridge, that will include places like Exhibition Park and the Sandman Hotel. The Coliseum is another one of those places that caters to large gatherings.
December's a lot of staff parties and things like that where their bosses or employment just kibosh it for them type of thing. Lots of youth and church groups we see that their leaders just put out there, so it takes it out of their hands type of thing. And then everybody else is kind of in a position where they're not sure if they're even allowed to do things. What does the future hold, right? If there was light at the end of the tunnel, you could prepare for that and budget for that, but is this 3 more months? Okay, we can survive that. 6, maybe. But is this 2 years down the road? Right? What is this? Where's the end? Is there an end? What's the game plan, I guess, from the higher ups?
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney was quoted at Tuesday's Media Avail saying that no indoor social gatherings are permitted, period. However, Kenney was empathetic to those struggling with mental health struggles. David Gabbard of Lethbridge Mental Health shared some tips for those struggling with the best way of getting through these difficult times.
While we're increasingly disconnected, reach out to friends, reach out to families, reach out to loved ones over Zoom. Maybe it's a coworker, but try and do so in ways that stay within the guidelines rather than finding loopholes. And there's many different ways that if you feel alone, if you feel isolated, if you feel like you're struggling with mental health, there are places to turn. There is help to seek. A lot of it anonymous, a lot of it is free. A lot of it you don't even have to leave your home for.
The Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association received a $24,350 donation. The group also received a few more donations that will go towards ensuring the association stays afloat. As video journalist Micah Quinn explains now, since they're a nonprofit, the COVID-19 pandemic has hit them very hard, and they're trying to navigate a new normal in the way they serve their clients.
A joint collaboration between local organizations ensured that a donation of just over $24,000 went to the Lethbridge Therapeutic Riding Association.
So what Dennis and Sylvia had done, they had reached out to other financial people in RBC and Canoe, and they raised between them $24,350. We haven't decided on how we're going to spend that money right now. We just have to give some thought to that.
The cost to run the facility is just over $350,000, and the LTRA is hoping to operate in the future on a much smaller level due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
This year, because of the COVID-19 crisis, we could only accommodate 4 children at a time. So that was quite devastating on the summer camp revenue. We however regrouped, and we have to rethink our whole process of how we're going to offer the riding in a safe manner. We're hoping it'll be better in 2021, but it's uncertain right now. We just have to keep going and stopping and rethinking and reevaluating what we have and looking at the funds that we have. We did take a loan from the government of the 40,000 COVID assistance. That has to be repaid 30,000 by I think it's 2022. We also took advantage of the wage subsidy to give us 10% wage subsidy on the 3 employees that we have.
The association also received $30,000 as part of their Ride for Dreams fundraiser and a $10,000 donation from the Rotary Club to help feed the horses. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
As we enter a season usually filled with in-person Christmas parties, COVID-19 has changed the way companies give back this year in a time when the need is great. Now, there's one Lethbridge company that's offering a unique way of giving back. Cornerstone Funeral Home is launching the 25 Days of Giving. Loris Alexander has the details.
25 Days of Giving is really special to us because it celebrates our 25th year in service. And so 25 years that we've been able to serve the community of Southern Alberta where we live, 25 years where we've been honored to be able to help the families where we live, help them going through a loss of a loved one, help them be able to give back to the community that we live and love.
And on their 22nd day of giving, Cornerstone Funeral Home picked Lethbridge Family Services to help with their Angel Tree program.
LFS, or Lethbridge Family Services, has been a staple in our community for a number of years, and they constantly give back. They're very community-minded, very community-oriented, and we find a lot of the same in ourselves as we find with them, and so it's really nice to be able to partner up with them and be able to give back, and especially during their Angel Tree campaign.
We're so thankful. One of the hardest packages to put together are teens, because every teen requires the certain generic things that we put in worth $50, and then we have extra stuff to put in. So when you have a bundle like what we're doing today, 36 teens, they're due tomorrow. We need to get the teen packages done for the schools because they're closing early, everyone knows. We have this help of Cornerstone volunteers.
Gallucci says numbers have risen this year by 20%. And with new restrictions, delivery of presents comes with new challenges.
We need more gifts. We need more donations. And for the first time ever, we're delivering gift bundles to each family member. That takes a lot of effort. Only 6 gift bundles can be delivered per hour because we take our time with them. We place them lovingly on the doorstep. We make sure they're taken into their homes. Each family is called.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Alberta government recently released its budget. Now the province is projecting a $21.3 billion deficit for 2020 and 2021. That is $2.8 billion less than the last quarter. Officials say it's mainly due to government efforts to hold the line on spending and improving revenue. Franco Terrazzano, the Alberta director with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joins me now from Calgary. Now, Franco, you say this budget was a dismal fiscal update and a wake-up call for Alberta's Finance Minister Travis Toews?
It was another bad news budget update, and really it has to be a wake-up call for Finance Minister Travis Toews to once again reprioritize belt tightening on government spending. And really over the last few months and for the last few years in Alberta, we've seen many families, many businesses really cut back on their nice-to-haves and focus on the essentials. And we need to see that in government. So we shouldn't be seeing multiple non-healthcare government departments increase their spending beyond budget 2020 levels when we already have high provincial spending in Alberta. So what we really need to see going forward is we need to see Finance Minister Travis Toews do a better job finding savings, do a better job reducing spending because Albertans can't afford higher taxes.
According to the Blue Ribbon Panel on Alberta's finances, our government has the highest per person spending in Canada. That is more than provinces with higher populations, including what, BC and Ontario?
If we spent like other large Canadian provinces, we would save $10 billion every single year. So clearly the Alberta government has a spending problem. We've had a government spending problem in Alberta for years, and that's why we really need to see the finance minister focus on cutting spending because Albertans can't afford higher taxes. Now, we did see one sign of good news from the budget update, and that's that Finance Minister Travis Toews is starting to talk about fiscal anchors. And one of those fiscal anchors is going to be bringing per person spending in line with other Canadian provinces. So we really need to see that happen.
That was the Alberta Director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Franco Terrazzano. Federal Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole asked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau whether he has a plan for distributing a COVID-19 vaccine to First Nations communities. Trudeau says they do, and will rely on expert advice in working out how to vaccinate our country's most vulnerable populations.
We've heard horror stories about the government's attempts to roll out PPE deliveries and COVID-19 testing. Members of the James Smith Cree First Nation were told by Indigenous Services staff to sew their own masks. This government, Mr. Speaker, sent PPE to China and told Indigenous Canadians to sew their own masks. Will the Prime Minister have a real plan to ensure vaccine distribution to First Nation communities are a priority
This government has stepped up in partnership with Indigenous communities to ensure that that first wave did not hit them particularly hard, and that throughout this second wave, we continue to be there for them. We will continue to be there to support communities across Manitoba, for example, that are suffering a terrible spike in that province. Communities across the prairies facing challenges right now. The federal government will continue to be there to work with them, to protect them, to support them, and we will continue to do so with experts as we roll out vaccines to the most vulnerable populations.
Manitoba's crackdown on COVID-19 includes a church, several anti-mask protesters, and a hotel. Dozens of people and business owners have been fined in recent days as the province continues to battle the highest per capita rate of new COVID-19 cases in Canada. 16 tickets worth $298 each were doled out following an anti-mask protest in Steinbach on November 14th. Health officials reported 471 new COVID-19 cases yesterday, along with 12 new deaths. When it comes to COVID-19 vaccine, millions of doses will be arriving from both Pfizer and Moderna in the new year. Political reporter Brian Lilly says the first shipment will go to frontline workers and seniors, and the rest of us could have access to the vaccine possibly by next spring.
I'll give the Trudeau government credit on some things. They've gone around and they've come to agreements with Pfizer in the US, with AstraZeneca in the UK, with Moderna. All these different companies around the world, they're signing, I think it's up to 7 different agreements to get whatever vaccines they can. But we are nowhere near the front of the line, and that is a major problem.
Mr. Lilly will also have details of how the Army will be brought in to help with vaccine distribution. That Q&A is coming up after business news. Indigenous hockey player Fred Sasakamoose has died after a battle with a presumed case of COVID-19. The 86-year-old died in a Prince Albert hospital after several days of fighting the virus. Sasakamoose played 11 games with the Chicago Blackhawks in 1953 and 54, becoming one of the first Indigenous players in the then 6-team NHL. He faced off against the likes of Gordie Howe and Maurice Rocket Richard. Sasakamoose was one of 11 children who was taken from his home in central Saskatchewan and put into a residential school. Edmonton Mayor Don Iveson says he will not be seeking re-election next fall. Iveson, who is 41 and was first elected mayor in 2013, says that he had only ever hoped to serve 2 terms. He says it was an incredible honor and a humbling duty to serve as mayor of Alberta's capital city. Iveson has been a member of Edmonton City Council since 2007 and is chairman of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Big City Mayors Caucus. Closer to home, researchers at the University of Alberta are working on finding a cure for diabetes. Dr. Seema Nagpal is the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada, and she says they've had success curing the disease in animals, so hopefully humans are next.
There's been some recent news about scientists at the University of Alberta who were able to, in animal models, cure diabetes. And that's been a very interesting line of research, and we certainly hope that this process will translate into new discoveries in humans. So this is something that we're watching very closely, and especially timely, considering that 2021 is the 100th anniversary of the year that Canadian researchers discovered insulin.
Don't miss this informative interview with Dr. Nagpal and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our program. Well, we had another mild day in southwestern Alberta, especially here in Lethbridge. Sun mixed with cloud and above zero, and we'll see more of that for the rest of this week. Complete weather details are coming up. It was another lovely day in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, hard to believe November is almost over and we're seeing above normal temperatures for this time of year?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if this warm weather trend continues. Hard to believe that we are only 1 month out from Christmas right now. Into this evening, we could see 60 km/h wind gusts. Overnight low -3 into tomorrow, high of 3 degrees. Mix of sun and cloud. We could see some wind gusts though, of course, 70 km/h expected. Lots of sunshine then expected for throughout the rest of the week, the weekend, and into next week with lovely temperatures. High of 9 on Friday, 8 Saturday and Sunday as well. 10 degrees expected on Monday. Nice to see those double digits again. 5 degrees is our expected high for next Tuesday with lovely sunny skies. So the almanac tells us the average high for this time of year, 2 degrees. We are going to be seeing temperatures well above that. -9 is the average low. 16 was our high temperature back in 1939. And our chilliest day on record was -28 in 1985. sun rose this morning just before 8 a.m. right at 7:59, and our sunset this afternoon at 4:38 p.m. That's kind of sad when you have to have an afternoon sunset, but that's how it is this time of year. Lots of precipitation expected on the west coast into tomorrow. 40% chance of rain in both Victoria and Vancouver. Victoria's high 8, 10 in Vancouver, 2 degrees the high in Edmonton, and 3 for Calgary with a mix of sun and cloud. Not a bad day in either of those two Alberta cities, that's for sure. As we look further into the prairies, -7 the expected high in Saskatoon. Could feel a little bit chillier with their wind chill. -3 the expected high in Regina. They could see a chance of flurries tomorrow afternoon. A mix of sun and cloud expected in Winnipeg with a high of 1. They too could actually see some flurries later on into tomorrow. Drizzle throughout the day expected in Toronto with a high of 11, high of 8 in Montreal with rain expected there. Showers also expected tomorrow in Ottawa with a high of 4, and that precipitation trend will continue into Atlantic Canada as we get into the Maritimes, with Fredericton, Halifax, St. John's all seeing a chance of rain tomorrow. Fredericton's high 3, 10 in Halifax, 6 degrees expected in Charlottetown with a mix of sun and cloud. St. John's high is 5 degrees. They could see a mix of drizzle and flurries tomorrow. So there you go. That is your weather.
Today's weather is brought to you, rain or shine, by the Gym in the North. Start your New Year's resolution today.
Ottawa says American duties on Canadian softwood lumber exports continue to be unfair and unjustified, even if they've been reduced. They're currently countervailing duties of close to 9% on certain exporters, down from the original 20%. Canadian government officials say the lower tariffs are a step in the right direction, but insist they remain baseless and unfair. The lower rate appears to be the result of the World Trade Organization decision in August that found the U.S. was wrong to impose the original duties back in 2017. Skidoo and Sea-Doo maker BRP beat expectations as it reported a nearly 47% increase in its third quarter profit. The Quebec-based company says its net income increased from $135.3 to $198.7 million. On an adjusted basis, BRP says it earned $2.13 per diluted share. That was well ahead of the $1.41 analysts were expecting. The company also raised its guidance for its full financial year, saying it now expects normalized earnings per share of $5 to $5.25. That is up from earlier guidance of $3.65 to $3.95. Cascades has announced plans to shutter its napkin plant in Laval, Quebec, and move production elsewhere. It says 54 workers will be impacted when it closes the plant by the end of June. Cascades says it will offer to relocate as many employees as possible to its other operations in Quebec. The company says the plant's key markets are restaurants, hotels, and public buildings, which have all been hit pretty hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 38 points on the day to 17,313. The Dow was down 173 points to 29,872. The S&P 500 was down 5 points to 3629, and the Nasdaq was up 57 points on the day to finish at 12,094. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 98 cents to 45.89 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 12 cents to 2.90 US. Gold was up 31 cents to 1807.87 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at 23.36 US an ounce. Wheat is at $272 per metric ton, barley's at $274, canola's at $5.78, and corn is at $293 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 20 cents to $111.38, feeder cattle were up $1.58 to $140.18, and lean hogs were up 88 cents to $66.18. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 76.90 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says the goal of his government's new COVID-19 restrictions was to reduce the amount of cases in our province. Alberta currently has over 13,000 active cases with more than 340 people in hospital. Sweeping restrictions, including businesses opening at reduced capacity and churches operating at 1/3 capacity, begin on Friday. Eating sugar will not cause diabetes. That's according to Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. Dr. Nagpal will also discuss how researchers are getting closer and closer to finding a cure for diabetes. That interview with Jeanette Roche is coming up shortly. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Bold and Brave is a local organization that inspires youth to be confident and learn life skills, and they're hosting a free family-friendly scavenger hunt from now until November 30th. Register online at boldandbrave.ca and receive your first clue. Begin the holiday season with a beautiful stroll through Winter Wonderland at the Nordbridge Senior Center on Monday, November 30th from 1 to 3 p.m. Cost is only $1 per person or free with a donation of a non-perishable food item for the food bank. Enjoy fresh apple cider and hot chocolate as you take in festive Christmas music and decorations. All are welcome. COVID-19 measures will be in place. Donations of gently used Christmas trees and decorations are gratefully accepted to help with decor. For more information, call 403-329-3222. Experience the magic at the Winter Light Festival at Nikayuko Japanese Garden beginning December 3rd from 7 to 9:30 p.m. Bundle up and enjoy the massive light display, ice sculptures, and other surprises throughout the garden. COVID-19 restrictions will be observed with one-way pathways along with other safety measures. Tickets must be purchased in advance. Visit nikayuko.com or call 403-328-3511 to purchase yours today. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Diabetes is an illness that seems to be on the increase worldwide. But what is it exactly? What causes it? And are we getting any closer to finding a cure for this? Joining me to discuss this further is Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. She joins us via Skype from Ottawa. Dr. Nagpal, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, we often hear of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Can you first of all explain what the difference is between the two?
Yeah, I just want to also highlight that it's Diabetes Awareness Month, so it's a really good time to be talking about diabetes and helping people understand what it is and what it is not. Diabetes is a disease where the body can either not produce insulin or can't use it properly in the body. And insulin, of course, is a hormone that's produced by the pancreas, and its role is to regulate the amount of glucose in the blood. And blood sugar must be carefully regulated to ensure that the body can function properly and that there's no acute health crises because of an extremely high or low blood sugar. So type 1 is diabetes, is a disease where the pancreas does not produce any insulin. And the cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown, and it's really not preventable at all. Type 2 diabetes is much more common here in Canada and around the world, and that's when the pancreas cannot effectively use or produce enough insulin. And that's in about 90 to 95% of Canadians living with diabetes.
Okay, so how widespread is it in Canada? And you just kind of gave us some stats there.
Yeah, there's about 11.5 million Canadians living with diabetes or pre-diabetes. So that's 1 in 3 Canadians living with the condition. Right now, at the age of 20, Canadians face a 50% chance of developing diabetes in their lifetime. So it has huge implications for the individuals, families, society overall. It's a very large epidemic of diabetes that we're facing.
Right, now you mentioned prediabetes. So what exactly is prediabetes?
Prediabetes occurs when an individual's blood sugar levels are high, but not yet high enough to be diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. If a person has prediabetes, they have a 50% chance of progressing on to develop type 2 diabetes.
Okay, so do we know what the cause of diabetes is? Like, are there ways to prevent it?
And I think that's a really important question because people have preconceived ideas of diabetes being a condition, specifically type 2 diabetes being a condition that a person brings upon themselves. And that's very untrue. We know that there are risk factors that place a person at higher risk for developing diabetes. And those can be thought of in kind of 2 different ways as modifiable risk factors, those we can change, and unmodifiable risk factors. And certainly in the unmodifiable risk factors, we know that a strong family history, aging, certain ethnic backgrounds. These are things that a person cannot change and that might place them at a very high risk. And it might be very likely that a person develops type 2 diabetes. Modifiable risk factors are ones that are within a person's control, and they can try to eat a healthier diet or become physically active. But sometimes, even despite best efforts, those unmodifiable risk factors really are too strong to overcome the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. So it's a complex condition with complex risks, and it really needs to be thought of in a more broad way. And the time for blame and shame is really over.
Okay, great. So now how would someone know if they have diabetes? Like, what are the symptoms?
Right. So I think that the symptoms are heterogeneous. They vary a fair bit across individuals. A person can feel increasingly thirsty. They may have to urinate more frequently, increased fatigue, blurred vision. Sometimes with type 2 diabetes, the symptoms are absent completely. So it really is, it varies from person to person, but really requires, if a person feels changes in their health, a connection with their healthcare provider to investigate what's going on and to get that addressed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. What are long-term effects of diabetes?
So yeah, the diabetes can result in complications that are quite significant. A study a few years ago showed that it doesn't have to, though. That with monitoring and treatments, that a person with diabetes can live as well as a person without diabetes. But we do know that diabetes can increase a person's risk for strokes, heart attacks, kidney failure, as well as amputations and vision loss. So there's very significant complications that can occur and really require a person to be active in their own care and working with a diabetes care team that can help prevent those complications.
You'd mentioned before that a 20-year-old could have a 50% chance of developing it or not. So what are the factors that that person could develop it? Is there anything that they can do to prevent that?
Right, and I think that interacting with a healthcare team where you're in close connection with a physician, a dietitian, a pharmacist, a nurse, these are all things that help a person identify potentially their own barriers to achieving a glucose that's within their target range, or and help to select the right treatments and therapies that work for them. And that's the best thing that can be done, to work with your healthcare team, to understand your condition, and to be supported through your family, your community, that allows so that you're allowed to access your treatments, to monitor your blood sugar, and really get a goal for what your treatment is supposed to achieve, and try to achieve those goals.
So if a young person eats like too much sugar, could they develop it, or is that a myth?
That's really a myth. I mean, healthy eating is really important, of course, for everybody. You don't develop diabetes because you eat too much sugar. No, it's really about the risk factors in type 2 diabetes that a person has, and how to the best degree possible to manage those risk factors through healthy eating, physical activity, stress management. These are all things that everybody wants to do and should focus on. But especially if you have a family history, or with aging, if you come from an ethnic background, like I said, these are all things that together may increase a person's risk. And there's no risk there's no way to prevent type 1 diabetes, and that idea that if a child or a young person has developed type 1, that they ate too much candy, it's really it's a myth, or a story that's told that is unfortunately works against the stigma that people already feel when they develop diabetes, and really should be displaced with more knowledge and truth about the condition.
Yeah, that's a very good point. How is type 2 diabetes treated and managed?
Well, at the onset, often it's managed through diet therapy, through healthy eating, regular and consistent physical activity. Ultimately, we know that diabetes is a progressive condition, meaning it continues, and most people will require medication to manage their diabetes. So often it is a combination of diet, physical activity, monitoring, medication use, and stress management for type 2 diabetes. For type 1 diabetes, it always requires insulin and monitoring, as well as those very healthy lifestyles that we all try to achieve with healthy eating and physical activity.
Great. So can you tell us about some of the newer methods of treatment, implanted devices, that type of thing, and can you tell us how effective they are?
Yeah, well, we know that specifically with type 1 diabetes, a person needs to inject insulin. And some people with type 2 also need to inject insulin. That can be done through a needle as well as and in recent years, it's not incredibly new, but in recent years, insulin pumps have been used to deliver insulin into people with requiring insulin. New other developments in technology means that people can have access to devices that monitor their blood glucose. These are flash monitoring devices as well as continuous glucose monitors. And these devices allow people to know their blood sugar through an easy mechanism because a sensor is placed under their skin, and they can use a device to continuously look at their blood sugar. Traditionally, people would have to prick their finger to get a drop of blood onto a test strip, and would have to test the blood sugar in that way. So there's more innovative ways that make blood glucose monitoring easier and the delivery of insulin easier through a pump that make controlling blood glucose a bit more easy for people living with diabetes who require insulin.
Okay, and have there been any recent developments in finding a cure or in transplanting a pancreas or something of this nature?
Yeah, that's a great question. Interestingly, there's been some recent news about scientists at the University of Alberta who were able to, in animal models, cure diabetes. And that's been a very interesting line of research, and we certainly hope that this process will translate into new discoveries in humans. So this is something that we're watching very closely, and especially timely, considering that 2021 is the 100th anniversary of the year that Canadian researchers discovered insulin and brought this discovery to the world and offered people living with diabetes around the world a chance to live long and healthy lives. So these researchers out of Alberta provide promise, and we really hope that it translates into something that's able to provide humans with a cure for diabetes. You also asked about pancreas transplants, so I'll just touch on that for a moment. And transplants are sometimes performed for people with diabetes, and these are surgical options that are often performed at the same time as pancreas transplants. And these are usually patients who are at high risk for kidney failure. And it's typically reserved for those people who have serious complications of diabetes. And that's because transplants themselves can have serious complications, and the medications that are used afterwards can cause side effects. So certainly it's an option for some people, but we're not quite at a cure. And in the meantime, we're looking for ways that we can offer people living with diabetes a way to manage their condition and to live long and healthy lives with a better and better quality of life.
And I would imagine that diabetes must have some sort of an impact on mental health as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It really does. People with diabetes are often overwhelmed or frustrated by the burdensome demands of managing this illness. They are at greater risk for developing certain mental illnesses, and people with mental illness are at greater risk for developing diabetes. We know that depression is more common in people with diabetes compared to the general population. So it's a real issue, and something that might be overlooked. The term that we often talk about is diabetes distress. And that's something that's very real because there's no break from diabetes. It's a 24/7 condition. You can't go down south to get away from it. You can't go out for dinner to get away from it. It's something that is forever present, and something that people need to develop ways to manage that burden and that stress over time.
I can imagine. Now, you'd mentioned so much in the interview about managing your diet and eating healthy. Is there a certain type of diet that is best to help manage diabetes?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about the best diet, the diabetic diet. Sometimes people say. I would just say that the best diet for somebody is a healthy diet that they can sustain. These binge diets that are very difficult, where you lose some weight for a short amount of time, but then that eating pattern is not sustainable. That's not what somebody should be shooting for. It's really a healthy, balanced diet that is sustainable over time. That's what somebody should be focusing on, and working closely with a dietitian to identify goals and help select a pattern, identifying things that work well for the individual. There's no one size fits all here. It's really individualized to your lifestyle and your culture and what you like to eat and your eating patterns. Those are all things that require a lot of thinking and planning to make sure that it's a good fit and it's something that you can keep up with.
Makes sense. Any final thoughts or advice for someone with diabetes or anyone who maybe is worried that they could be developing it?
Yeah, I think just making sure that you get the resources and the support that you need. Checking out our website at diabetes.ca is there's some really good information about how to reduce your own personal risk if that's something that somebody is willing to try to do. For people living with diabetes, there's lots of resources on our website as well. But working closely with your healthcare team to make sure that you identify what you wish to shoot for, that your own health goals, and that you're working towards that with your healthcare team. I think that's really important to make sure that your own goals are well defined and that you're working towards those.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagpal, for the information. Dr. Seema Nagpal, the Vice President of Science and Policy for Diabetes Canada. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
The Trudeau government came under fire recently for admitting that Canada will get COVID vaccines later than other countries. To discuss this in more detail is Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilly. Brian, while the United States could start receiving their vaccines next month, it'll be late January at the earliest for Canadians?
Yeah, the United States, according to some reports, could be as early as December 11th, depending on what the Food and Drug Administration does. Here in Canada, even if we have quicker approval, which I'm not convinced we will with Health Canada, even, look, all of these major organizations work together, the FDA, Public Health Canada, they all share information, and they're all supposed to have, where one approves, the other can give quick approval. And at a time like this, we need that. And yet on things like rapid testing, Canada's been slow. So we could be delayed by a couple of things. One, the approval process that the government decides to follow within Canada. And two, the fact that according to the Prime Minister, he says we just don't have massive vaccine production capabilities anymore. Well, we used to. And I remember the Harper government giving a contract to a Quebec vaccine manufacturer to say, look, if we need the H1N1 vaccine, when we get it, you will be making it. And they gave them a bunch of money to make sure that Canada had it. I'll give the Trudeau government credit on some things. They've gone around and they've come to agreements with Pfizer in the US, with AstraZeneca in the UK, with Moderna. All these different companies around the world, they're signing, I think it's up to 7 different agreements to get whatever vaccines they can. But we are nowhere near the front of the line, and that is a major problem.
Now, a big question is how will the vaccines get from the federal government to the local communities? There's even talk of using the Army, Brian. Now, you spoke with General Rick Hillier, who's heading up the distribution task force. He's probably telling you it's a pretty big job.
Well, he's heading up the distribution task force for Ontario alone. And what's surprising here is that we're starting to get more information from provincial governments than federal governments. And the federal government has been under pressure to say, tell us what your plan is. We know you don't have a vaccine yet. We know that none have been fully approved. We're hopeful that they will come soon. but they could show up sooner than expected. We weren't expecting that Pfizer could be ready as early as December 11th or Moderna could be ready before the end of the year. Now we're looking at that. Okay, what if Canada miraculously gets vaccine before the end of the year or in early January? Are we ready? The feds keep delaying and saying nothing. The Ford government here in Ontario decided we need help. And it was Premier Doug Ford who said, you know what? I want a general in charge. I want an expert in logistics. And he called up General Rick Hillier, who was Chief of Defense Staff from 2005 to 2008, led Canada's forces through some of the toughest days in Afghanistan and knows about logistics. I talked to him and he says he's up for the job, but it's going to be difficult. I also did ask him, for all those who are saying, oh, no, I don't like the Army being involved. It means it's going to be a mandatory vaccine and troops will come by and shove it in my arm. And he said, get real. That's not going to happen. We don't have mandatory vaccines in Canada, and the Army's not going to be doing that. But they are ready to stand by and help with distribution, which is going to be a massive undertaking, especially for Pfizer. Remember, this is the vaccine that needs to be kept at minus 70 Celsius in order to stay stable.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has allegedly been taking some shots at premiers of late, claiming that they're behind on rapid testing, that he's given them millions of rapid tests which are not being used. Is this really true?
No, unfortunately not at all. And it's a bit of a break in what we've seen as, a wall of solidarity between the premiers and the federal government. And it's not coming from premiers taking shots at the Prime Minister. Occasionally they will say, look, Prime Minister, we need the rapid test approved. We heard that a lot from Premier Jason Kenney in Alberta, Premier Doug Ford in Ontario, but it was never partisan. And it wasn't, hey, you're sitting on it. It was, this is our priority. We need it done. Well, finally, the rapid tests are approved. And yes, the feds have said that they will fund millions of tests to go to the province, but they haven't sent them. And so last week, the Prime Minister said this in the House of Commons, and I called the Ford government and said, what's going on? They said, you've got to talk to the bureaucrats about this. This is not a political question. I talked to the bureaucrats from the Ministry of Health in Ontario and from Public Health Ontario, which is an arm's length organization they actually run the testing. They both told me the same thing. So the Prime Minister says millions of tests across the country. The biggest province, 40% of the population, at that point had received 89,000 ID Now tests. These are the ones from Abbott Laboratories. 70,000 PanBio tests, which are still kind of being, sussed out. They spent the last few weeks, they would run a rapid test alongside a standard PCR test, just to make sure that they are calibrated properly and that they're doing them accurately. They have been deployed by the provinces. Alberta's been running the program out at Calgary Airport, but the Prime Minister, for whatever reason, is trying to make it sound like he's doing his job. It's those premiers that aren't. That's playing politics with the pandemic. It's not what we need.
Well, we're all in this pandemic together, Brian. You obtained federal data showing that while many private sector workers lost their jobs, close to 60,000 federal workers were apparently sent home and told to collect pay while not working.
Yeah, this is remarkable. And that phrase, we're all in this together. How many times have we heard politicians say this? I haven't been able to obtain provincial numbers from any province, but the federal government, I'm sorry, this is frustrating. More than 58,000 workers were sent home with pay on what's called 699. That's leave other. So that's not maternity leave, it's not sick leave, it's not bereavement leave, it's not long-term disability. And on the government's website, they say this is specifically about COVID-19, and many people didn't have childcare or they couldn't connect through their IT networks. Well, there were a lot of people in the private sector who had trouble with childcare, who had trouble with their IT networks and had to figure it out. At the same time, there were 2.7 million Canadians in this time frame between mid-March and early April who lost their jobs. 2.7 million Canadians lost their jobs. Another 2.8 million saw reduced hours, significantly reduced hours, according to StatsCan. And 58,000 federal workers were told, go home and collect pay. It's more than 18 million hours were paid out between mid-March and the beginning of September. The last date we have is September 6th. At that point, there were about 8,400 workers still on this leave. Since I published this piece in the Toronto Sun, Hal, federal workers have contacted me and said, you don't know the half of it. Some departments didn't even use this code, which tells us how many were on that. So they were just told, go home, don't worry about working. Others have told me the incidents of departments using 699, this code, have gone up again. One worker saying after being off for 6 months, they got back to regular work. Now they're down to 2 days a week and 3 days at home with pay. They said they don't like it. They said, I don't feel right about being paid to sit at home, collect full pay while watching TV because I'm told not to go anywhere.
Brian, there's a new report outlining some problems with the new federal loan program. It's for businesses in trouble that have hired more consultants than the number of companies it gave out loans to.
Yeah, this is remarkable. A multi-billion-dollar program that has given out very little money just to two companies, a casino company and a coal mining company. This is supposed to be for large employers. It's supposed to be the lender of last resort if a company gets into trouble. And they've given out loans to two companies, but they've given out consulting contracts to many more. This is bizarre. Conservative MP Michael Cooper digging up this info, putting it out in the public and saying, this is yet another example of how the federal government just hasn't been able to get programs for businesses right. I'll give the Trudeau government credit where it's due. They, despite some problems, they got CERB out the door. When people needed money just to be able to put food on the table, the money was there. But when it came to this, this giant program to help large companies stay afloat, so that we didn't have companies that employed thousands of people going out of business and laying off workers, they got it wrong. When it came to the rent relief program, they got it wrong. And even with the updated rent relief program, they got it wrong. When it came to the wage subsidy program, they've messed that up more than once. And it's as if, one bankruptcy consultant who talked to me, who represents small and medium-sized businesses, said, when I look at how the federal government designs these programs, it's clear to me that there's nobody on the inside designing them that has any idea how businesses work.
With the feds doling out hundreds of millions of dollars, our debt just keeps on rising, Brian. We've not seen a federal budget in almost 2 years now. Are we getting any closer to getting a handle on our finances? Our debt is over $1 trillion.
Well, we think it's over $1 trillion. When asked, they'll never actually answer. I mean, these are estimates from private sector economists, from the parliamentary budget officer. Pierre Poilievre, the conservative finance critic, has asked multiple times, is this accurate? And he gets nowhere. We're hoping in about a week we'll get some sense, but it won't even be a full budget. The last budget we had, I believe it was the end of February. I know it was in Ottawa for it. It was around the same time as Jody Wilson-Raybould hearings, late February, early March of 2019. And now it's almost 2 years later, and what we're going to get is a fiscal update. It's not unusual to get a fiscal update in October or November, but normally there's been a budget, say, in March sometime. This is going to be the closest we get to a snapshot. And given how reluctant newly minted Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland has been to divulge any information, I'm not sure how clear a picture we will get. If it's like past ones, it will be an eye-opener. If it's the way the government has been behaving lately, it will be a lot of smoke and mirrors. So we'll have to wait and see a week from Wednesday.
Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne is warning that tough talk on China could hurt the release of the two Michaels, Kovrig and Spavor. Meanwhile, there are other MPs who are part of a group demanding that Ottawa release Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou.
And Nikki Ashton from the NDP and newly minted Green leader Annamie Paul, who was hoping for a seat. She lost in the Toronto Centre by-election, so she is not my MP, thank goodness. She's out there campaigning with the Communist Party of China to release Miss Meng. That's confusing to me. It's also confusing to me why Minister Champagne is now saying this tough talk is going to hurt things. The Trudeau government, after not having tough talk for a long time, started having tough talk. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, the Defense Minister called it hostage negotiations, or hostage diplomacy, sorry. Now suddenly they're backing away from their own tough talk. It does leave you scratching your head. it is more than 700 days that these two men have been held hostage by China in response to Meng Wanzhou being detained on an extradition treaty. China wants an extradition treaty with us, by the way, but they don't want us to honor the ones that we have. So a little bit confusing there. But I'm not sure why they've decided to go from not saying anything negative about China to getting tough on them to now saying we can't have tough talk. It leaves you scratching your head, Hal.
Brian, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his gun ban on May 1st, he cited the Nova Scotia massacre that occurred days earlier as part of his reasoning. But even though Trudeau's solution focuses on legal gun owners, you obtained a briefing that shows he knew before the announcement that the Nova Scotia shooter only had illegal guns.
Yeah, and within days, myself and others in the media had either been contacted or contacted people who knew Gabriel Wortman and said that they had reported him to the RCMP. His own father told my colleague Joe Warmington that he had reported his son to the RCMP for threats of violence. And people had reported that he had illegal weapon stashes, and they never went to see them. So I'm not shocked that this briefing note presented to Trudeau days after the shooting on April 24th showed that he knew 3 of the firearms that he used were smuggled in from the United States. A law enforcement carbine, that's the rifles that police now carry. It was traced to a California gun shop, never legally imported into Canada. 2 pistols purchased at a gun shop in Maine, illegally smuggled into Canada. And then a Ruger Mini 14, which is a fairly common rifle in Canada, but was purchased in Canada. No idea how Wortman got his hands on it because he never was authorized to own guns in this country. So there's a lot of questions about that. Despite that, Trudeau went out and said he was bringing in the gun ban. Now, for people that don't understand why this matters, the Prime Minister's solution to a massacre that happened is not to deal with crime, not to deal with gun smuggling, but to say to legal gun owners who are already following the law, you have to hand over your rifles. We've known for a long time the major problem with gun crime in this country is the border. Doesn't matter what area of the country we're talking about, it's the border. They're going to spend close to $1 billion on this so-called gun buyback. Meanwhile, $86 million over 5 years for the RCMP and the Canada Border Service Agency to deal with smuggling issues.
One of our regular contributors, Toronto Sun columnist and political reporter Brian Lilly, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.